Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning friends. So, we are going to take up another important issue which is basically the part of the unit 9, and it is basically on intervention of public and private agencies on sanitation in India. It is an overview about that, but the most important thing is that we have to see that how the public and private agencies with regard to the sanitation is going to be taken into consideration. I think when we try to speak about that, the most important thing is that of recent we try to speak about the intervention of the private sector, which has basically emerged as a major player in the development process. So, that way we try to see that there has been the advent of various sectors in terms of power generation, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of roads, airport, housing. In all these things we try to say that we have the specific economic zone, and also we try to see the incorporation of the multinational corporations are also coming to the picture. So, that way under the era of globalization we try to see that we have the public and the partner private players in that sense, both equally competing with regard to the various issues of development. But here our concern is more towards how we can speak about the question of cleanliness and beautification, and where I think the concern for environmental activism also comes into the picture. And the most important thing is that we have to speak about the concern for human development, and there I think we have to see both the things at the macro level. Now, we try to see that we have the expansion of the human functioning in terms of health and educational attainment, in terms of the income issue of equality of economic poverty or the economic growth. All these things in that sense are related to each other, and we try to see that the specific states in that sense we are considered to be the poorer state are going to be put very differently in terms of the human development index. And that way we try to see that there are various instances where the status of sanitation in that sense across the Indian scenario is also going to be divergent, keeping in view the diversity and the regional differences. And that way we try to see that sanitation in India has to be seen very differently. Now, we try to see that we have this issue of sanitation for three major reasons. One of course is to prevent the disease, then of course to speak about the beneficial programs for the women in that sense, and to put an S to the so called disadvantaged groups. So, these are certain things which we have to keep in mind, and that of course is a concern of the Millennium Development Goal which is basically set forth. And impact of sanitation in India has to be seen through various parameters. I think this unit is bit based on the secondary data. It tries to speak about the conditionality which have been there with regard to the understanding of the Indian scenario. I think certain statistical figures in that sense are going to be used, but I think the detailed analysis is going to tell you that how there is a variation with regard to the historicity and how we try to reach to the level of sanitation. I think we try to see that in terms of purchasing power parity, we have to see that the inadequate sanitation concern in that sense is there in India. We try to speak about that how through time we have the enhancement of GDP, but what is more important in that sense of course is that it is basically the net balances of the profits and the negative in that sense which we have to see, and we have to speak about what are the potential gains for the improved sanitation in India, and that can be seen as one important aspect in terms of the economic cost. We can speak about the adversities which have been mitigated. We can speak about the economic gains which are with regard to the improved sanitation, and for that I think the most important thing of course is that we have to speak about the various understanding which tries to speak about building the toilets, construct and operation of the waste disposal system, in terms of promoting the hygiene practices, or in terms of combining the efforts of the household to construct and upgrade the toilets. So, these are certain things which we have to take into consideration when we try to speak about the status of sanitation in India. it may be seen as the physical component in that sense, but what is more important in that sense is it speaks about the trajectory which has been there with regard to the basic amenities in that sense. Either it is the question of the safe drinking water, which we try to say globally it is more than 1 billion people who do not have an access to the safe drinking water, and we try to see that 2.6 billion do not have an access to the sanitation. All these issues that in that sense are quite alarming, but what is more important in that sense of course is that we try to see our pace from the first 5-year development plan, and the first 5-year plan in that sense which tries to inculcate various changes in the Indian scenario in terms of pressing development priorities, and therefore, we try to see that 1981 to 91 is basically seen as where the rural sanitation coverage in that sense has grown to some significant aspect, and we try to see that the various plan strategies which have been there, either it is in terms of improving the sanitation and the drinking water quality processes in that sense. We try to see that only 47% of the household have an access to the toilet facilities, and more than 600 million people defecate in the open. That of course is where we try to see that the situation has been alarming, and we have to promote the use of toilet and the quality drinking water, which needs an urgent attention. And apart from that, I think the parallel programs which have been there in order to have the sanitation management is through the Panchayat Raj institutions, and also the aim of the total sanitation campaign is basically meant for putting the people centered understanding, the demand driven and the local control over the resource and the fund is going to be more meaningful. And for that, I think the rural sanitation coverage in that sense which we try to speak about, it has increased from 48% in 2008 to 67% in 2010. That of course is something which is significant. We try to speak about the advocacy towards the Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan in that sense as such, and we have the Nirmal Gram Puruskar. All these things in that sense are basically meant for enhancing the qualities of the rural India in that sense in terms of sanitation. We try to speak about that 19.7 million new toilet users has been enhanced per year, and we try to speak about 12.8 millions which are there in the rural India. And the United Nations declared 2008 as the International Year for Sanitation, in the view that 2.6 million of the people in the world would lack even the basic sanitation facilities, and they are deadly consequential for the health and the human dignity. And for that, I think India, which has reported to 7.5% deaths on the issue of sanitation and water related disease, is going to be quite alarming. And we basically try to see that the central rural sanitation program, which started long back in 1986, has been metamorphosed into the form of total sanitation campaign, which of course is been in advent from 1999 and tries to advocate the community participation. We try to see that the aim of eradicating the open defecation in the rural area is targeted by 2012, and there is no doubt that majority of the population which lives in the villages, we have to speak about the slum conditions of the populated density areas in that sense, which has to be free from that. And also we have this JN National Urban Renewal Mission, which try to go for 100% sanitation coverage in the urban areas. So we have parallel policies in that sense, both in the rural and the urban, and the role of the cities open defecation in that sense, safe disposal and the liquid human waste management has been truly emphasized in the case of the urban India. We try to speak about the various strategies which have been initiated by the government of India. We try to speak about the capacity and the communication development units, which are basically meant for a certain amount of drinking water supply programs and the policies which has been there across, especially when we try to see the urban local bodies in provision of the sanitation services. We try to find out that the urban local bodies which plays an important role in planning and development of the urban areas. And here I think the municipal government enactment of Constitution 74th Amendment in 1992, they try to speak about that urban planning including the town planning is part and parcel. We have the regulation of land use, we have the planning for economic and social development, the roads and the bridges, and water supply for the domestic and industrial commercial purpose. And apart from that, the public health, sanitation, conservation and solid waste management in that sense is going to be important. And apart from that, we have to speak about the issue of urban forestry, safeguarding the interest of the weaker sections of the society, and the slum improvement and upgradation. All these things in that sense are part and parcel of the 74th amendment, and along with that we have the issue of urban poverty alleviation. We try to speak about the promotion of cultural and educational aspect, and also we have to have certain vital statistics which is related to the registration of the birth and the death rates. So, that way we try to see that there are various attempts in that sense which have been there to enhance the quality standards. I think we try to speak about the governmental frameworks at the state level. I think different states, especially we try to speak about the state sanitation policies in Rajasthan, Bihar, or we try to speak about the Andhra Pradesh or Kerala, West Bengal and Maharashtra. We try to see that there have been certain cases where things have been seen differently. I think Kerala policies and the programs which we try to speak about, it is basically they have the formation of the local ward communities which are representing around 500 families with the gender equity. And then we have the inventory of sanitation in these areas to identify the households which needs the basic subsidy for building up of the latrines. And we also try to speak about that how the Rajasthan state policy in that sense is trying to work for the issue of poverty alleviation. The municipal authorities which will arrange for the sanitation is going to be important, and we try to speak about that in Karnataka we have the water supply and sanitation policy of 2002, and the basic objective of course is that how the local bodies in the state, that is the Karnataka Urban Water Supply and Drainage Board or the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board continues to strengthen the issue of urban areas with regard to the piped water supply and sanitation services to the nearby dwelling. And we try to see that the government of Karnataka is basically trying to have the partnership with regard to the universal coverage of the water and sanitation services at the different platforms. And we try to speak about that there is certain institutional arrangement of the government of Karnataka in terms of the policy formulation, in terms of regulation, monitoring and evaluation of the efficiency of the operation, in terms of providing the bulk of resources in that sense which are meant for the encouraging the use of public private partnership, as well as we try to see that promotion of the economic and the commercial viability of water supply is going to be important. I think the institutional arrangement in that sense is going to play a crucial role, and especially the role of urban local bodies in that sense is going to be significant, which has been seen or reflected in the article 243 W of the Constitution of India, which is basically comes under the 12th schedule. And we basically try to see that urban local bodies is responsible for water supply and sewerage services, and the basic idea in that sense is that we try to speak about that the private sector participation arrangement also has been made with regard to these particular issues. We try to speak about the whole case where we have certain arrangements which were basically meant for the governance frameworks at the local level. We try to speak about the state of West Bengal, where the intensive sanitation project has started. In that sense, we have the network of trained local volunteers which are working for that, and apart from that we try to speak about that the Mumbai slum sanitation program in that sense, which is seen as been assisted by the World Bank, is going to be important. And here I think it is basically the creation of 330 community toilet blocks with more than 5100 toilets in that sense is going to be an important issue. And it basically has the participatory demand led approach, which is basically to be seen in terms of the contribution from the various NGOs which are basically seen at the various level. And if you try to see the various 5-year plans, especially the first 5-year plan of Government of India, which was trying to focus upon that how much money is spent in through years in that sense, and then the state government has put till 2010-11, we try to speak about that around 135,000 crore on rural drinking water has been utilized. Under the 11th 5-year plan, we try to speak about that the total expenditure is exceeded to 90,000 crores, and that way we try to see that the number has drastically increased. And we basically try to speak about that the whole idea in that sense is that we have to speak about that how the accelerated rural water supply program in that sense has to be made concern in that sense. And for that I think there is a need for bringing about certain changes. I think we try to speak about in various issues in that sense. We try to speak about the covered habitation due to the poor situations, in that sense increase in the population and growth of the settlement, increase contamination of the issues in that sense, and also we try to speak about the changing norms of coverage adopted by the state due to the flexibility under the various Swajal Dhara Yojana, and that is where we try to see that the rural drinking water sector reforms in that sense are being adopted in 1999 for the improvement in the pilot basis with regard to the Swajal Dhara launched program in 2002. And I think these are certain initiative which is going to provide a huge bulk in that sense. I think we try to speak about that the arrangements which have been made in terms of the drinking water program, they try to focus upon certain issues which is going to be quite significant. I think we try to speak about the Bharat Nirman phase 1 from 2005 to 2009, and then second phase, that is from 2009 to 2012, and this program is basically meant for building of the rural infrastructure. This has been launched by Government of India in 2005, and the phase 1 of this program was implemented in the period of 2005 to 2006, and we try to see that the rural drinking water is one of the 6 component of Bharat Nirman, and during this Bharat Nirman phase 1, the period around 55,067 is uncovered, and 3.31 lakhs has been put for the habitation. That way we try to see that the prioritize in that sense, of course, is the water quality problem in that sense is coming up. The use of arsenic and fluorides in the water content is going to be seen, and how we are going to overcome that is the biggest challenge that we are trying to face. And the most important thing in that sense is that we have to achieve the safe drinking water, that of course is seen as one of the important priority. And I think when we try to speak about in terms of the research and development, we try to focus upon the issue whereby the rural water supply and sanitation is being seen as how ministry is working for providing the funding with regard to the research organization, and the research advisory committee in that sense which has been constituted is basically meant for reviving the issue of the rural water supply, and that is where we try to see that the basic attempt in that sense which has been reflected in the 11th 5-year plan and later on in the 12th 5-year plan is basically meant for that what are the various types of materials, structure and the storage which are used for the rainwater harvesting structure in terms of an alternative source of energy, or sometimes we try to see that the mobile packed water treatment plants for the calamity affected area is another important aspect. The chemicals to remove the choking of the tube wells in the drought prone areas is another important aspect, and then the development of the deep tube well water well hand pumps which is going to be another important aspect which has to be seen, and these are the things in that sense which try to speak about the issue of water in that sense. Then equally important is the integrated water management which of course is going to be another important aspect, and along with that we try to speak about the large scale arsenic removal through the pumping oxygen into the arsenic area, and then we try to speak about the use of traditional plants, seeds in the water treatment, technology development for the insecticides and the pesticides in the drinking water, identification of the protection of possible safe water zones. These are certain things which are taken into consideration, and then we try to see the issue of detection of the different viruses in the drinking water, and many other aspects in that sense are going to be covered. But apart from that, we also try to speak about the development of economic design for sustainability structure in the hilly areas, and that is where we try to see that the research on water resource database, community monitoring of the groundwater, rainfall, water storage, water quality data is going to be an important issue, and we basically try to see that there is certain amount of assessment on these particular issues. We try to speak about that the 12th 5-year plan by 2017 we are going to be targeted that at least 55% of the rural population in the country will have an access of the 55 LPCD within their household, and that is the most important thing when we try to speak about that, and it is basically that horizontal and the vertical distance of not more than 100 meters from the household without any barriers are to be taken into consideration, and by 2017 it is targeted that at least 35% of the rural population have individual household connections, which is going to be a significant thing which has been historically talked about. And we try to speak about the piped water supply with all metered household connections has to be taken into consideration on priority. We have the basic piped water supply with a mix of household connections, that is another important aspect which has to be taken into consideration. And then I think the recommendation of the working group on the rural sanitation, it basically tries to speak about the fact that what are the issues which have to be taken into consideration. I think somewhere we try to see at the Government of India level, we have the dedicated monitoring directorate to see the setup. We have at the state level a multidisciplinary rural water and sanitation management organization which is working for that. We also try to see that it is an all India service of 12 to 16 years of seniority in that sense, which has to see the issue of the work related to the water securing planning, water conservation, recharge, solid and the liquid waste management, sanitation, construction of civil and engineering work and the financial planning. All these things in that sense are taken into consideration when we try to speak about these particular issue. And we also have the concern for integrated habitat development scheme, which basically has been part and parcel of the initial Indira Awas Yojana. And now we try to see that we have the solid and the liquid waste management should be the essential component of these habitation. It is not only that, we also should have the total sanitation campaign which has to be the provision for the toilets and the domestic water supply has to be part and parcel of this particular thing. So, we try to speak about the integrated habitat development scheme which is combination of the various other programs which have been there, and we also try to speak about the concern for the capacity building of the school teachers at the rural level. We try to speak about the case of ASHA and the Anganwadi workers who are working for the hygiene and sanitation. I think the education department with in relation with the state and the center definitely is going to speak about the functionality of the toilets and the hygiene practices, which includes the basic amenities in that sense, and also the providing the awareness to the categories of peoples in the rural areas. And I think the ministry in that sense is basically trying to take into consideration certain important aspect which are going to be important. Like we try to speak about certain issues where we try to speak about the community toilets in that sense, or the government aided school which are provided with these facilities. And then I think the role of the civil society in that sense in terms of NGOs are also going to be important. We try to speak about the civil society organizations which should play a key role in facilitating the development planning capabilities, especially we try to speak about the CSO which are involved in the policy formulation, in planning and in the project implementation. And also we try to see that sensitizing the political leadership in that sense is another important aspect, and we have to speak about that how the high level of political support for sanitation in that sense is going to be seen as an important concern. And we basically try to speak about that there are certain issues which have something to deal with the National Urban Sanitation Policy, that is NUSP, which is basically seen in terms of how there has to be a linkage between the national school sanitation initiatives of Ministry of Human Resource Development and also the Government of India. And we try to speak about that it is in collaboration with the CBSE and NCERT in that sense at different level, and these are the programs which are basically meant for sort of an integration to have then operationalization of the sanitation infrastructure. And the project is basically supported with the Ministry of Urban Development, and the whole idea in that sense of course is to revive the issue of city sanitation plans. And the basic idea in that sense of course is that how these things are to be put into practice. For that I think the role of the education in that sense is going to be important. So, we try to see that there are certain specific state sanitation strategies which are seen as the key issues, and the most important thing in that sense of course is that we try to identify that the city level we try to speak about the 4 city sanitation planning development is prepared, and the project is basically meant for bringing about certain amount of transformation. And parallelly and equally important is the water sanitation and hygiene, that is WASH in that sense, which is seen as an important program. The program which will reduce the WASH related issues, that is the disease, mortality, morbidity, including the chronic undernutrition. All these things in that sense are part and parcel of the issues in that sense which are to be taken into consideration by the national and the state government. we try to speak about the access to the data, information and knowledge to the guide to the WASH advocacy, policy and the planning programs and the budgetary action. All these things in that sense are to be part of this WASH initiative, and the most important thing is that we have to speak about how we can have certain basic things to improve the child's learning towards the environment by ensuring the access to the sustainable safe water and sanitation facilities and the hygiene practices in the school. I think that is where we try to see that the whole idea in that sense of course is trying to bring about the change from by learning in that sense as such. And I think since the school education in that sense is going to provide with the basic amenities in terms of the awareness and the knowledge about the proper utilization of the issue of sanitation is going to be an important aspect, because they will be the future citizens and how they are going to take up these issues is going to be an important issue. I think beyond that we try to see that there are certain states which have been identified by the National University of Education Planning and Administration, that is NUPA, that 70% of the elementary schools are without any toilet facilities, and this was basically seen as one of an important aspect. And according to the educationists, the lack of toilet facilities in the municipal and the government school is seen as one significant factors for the girls dropping out from during that time, and that of course is I think one important aspect. And then we try to speak about that the United Nations Millennium Development Goal, which has an ambitious agenda of better human conditions in by 2015, and later on we try to see that MDGs in that sense is basically working for 2035 is basically trying to speak about how we have to have the policies that the women's participation is critical to the success of the sanitation program. That of course is the bigger agenda which has to be taken into consideration, and we basically try to see that it is the question of mainstreaming the gender perspective which is going to be important, and that of course is the way in which we can speak about the development of the issue of sanitation in practice. And I think somewhere we try to see that the women's use latrines for the safeguard of the household members, and that particular aspect in that sense is to be taken seriously, because it is basically seen as that the primary users of the water, hygiene and educators and managers have been the women and the girls, and that is where we try to see that the women's participation in the particular is expected to create the sustainable projects, including the women as the primary users, consumers and managers, then trying to see them in terms of increasing women's social capital, and the third is the access to the women's knowledge. All these things in that sense have to be taken together, and that has been one of an important aspect which has been highlighted by the World Bank. And the most important thing in that sense of course is that we try to see that the International Water and Sanitation Center which tries to report that why the household will spend money on the latrines and convenience basically is for the privacy and the safety for the women's, and we have to see that latrines are the convenient for both men and women, and the use of bad weather in that sense or the privacy and the safety of the women in that sense has to be seen as one important aspect. And for that I think we have to see that women are viewed as having the greatest incentives to keep the system functioning, and for that I think access to the clean water will enable the women to spend more their time better. Then sanitation will lower the women's risk for the physical attack, and also the family wellness and the child survival will reduce the women's household responsibility, and that of course is where we try to see the strength of the Millennium Development Goal lies in that sense. We have to see that women are also marked as those who can best introduce the behavior that will lead to the better public toilet, and for that I think we have to speak about that their potentiality in that sense has to be taken into consideration, that women can also play an important role for mobilizing the demand through women. So, women to women in that sense of course contact is going to be more crucial. We have to speak about that how the women's participation approach to the latrine marketing means for latrine usage by the target group is going to be more appealing. We can speak about certain other issues in that sense which are to be seen in terms of the fact that how the linkage to the women can lead to the women's empowerment, I think we try to speak about certain other technicalities, like we try to speak about the question of the imprisoned by the daylight in that sense is seen as one important aspect, and the early mornings or the late at night are seen as the time in that sense in which the women's were earlier utilizing, either it is the rural in that sense or the urban societies. The cases of the sexual harassment and the rape are really threats in that sense, and in order to overcome that, I think the country program action plan in that sense, which of course is been set by the Millennium Development Goal, is basically trying to speak about the integrative use of the women's potential in that sense. And I think when we try to speak about that, the basic thing in that sense which have to be taken into consideration is that we have to speak about that the child protection again is going to be another significant aspect in terms of putting an end to the child labor in that sense, or the child marriage, or we try to see that the gender bias selection in that sense. All these things in that sense are basically related to the women, and the most important thing in that sense of course is that we have to work for the gender equality perspective. And here the concern is towards the campaign against the child marriage and trafficking, perspective building and capacity building on gender equality, challenging the gender stereotypes in campaign material and teaching learning material, development and application of disagreed database, and the planning and the monitoring tools. That is going to be important, and apart from that, the evidence based advocacy on the key issues of women's and the girl rights are going to be seen on priority, and that is where we try to see that the child development and nutrition supported the ICDS and NRHM at the different level, and we try to see that we have what one can say the issue related to the various empowerment of adolescent girl in that sense, and we try to speak about that how the concern for the adolescent girl are to be seen with regard to the maternity protection. All these things are going to be an important issue, but the most important aspect of course is the issue related to the menstrual hygiene, and which of course is going to be an important issue when we try to speak about the women's concern. I think the South Asia in general, we try to speak about that how the gender inequality excludes the women from the decision making, and either it is a question of the low literacy level, or in terms of the lack of confidence or the social norms. We basically try to see that there are critical barriers to the women's involvement, and there is a need for the long term strategies to overcome these issues, and in that we basically try to speak about the fact that the Hindu culture in that sense, which was believing on the fact of the issue of hygiene for women in that sense, has certain restrictions, and for that I think the most important thing is that we have to speak about the issue of menstruation in a different way. And WaterAid, which is basically working with regard to this particular issue, we try to speak about the hygiene management of menstruation, which has to be seen as one of the important challenge for the women in India, especially with regard to the serious health concern. We try to speak about that how the girl has to live healthy, productive and dignified lives. All these things in that sense are going to be crucial, and for that we have to speak about the issue of the clean water for washing clothes and to absorb the menstrual blood. All these things in that sense are to be taken into consideration, and also there is a disposal of the used cloths and the pads, which are going to be important. So, I think we have to speak about the whole concern for conservation and sustainability of these particular issues, which are directly or indirectly related to the issue of the hygiene for women in that sense. We have the wash services, which are basically providing for the intervention at various levels. I think the wash service in that sense is basically meant for the culture's perception and trying to overcome the gender inequalities which are prevalent, especially when we try to speak about these particular issues. We try to see that we need to have the long term strategies for these aspects. And then I think we can speak about this issue of health, sanitation and children, and how we try to see these particular issues in the Indian scenario. I think we have to see things in terms of intersectoral and inter district or the state level, and we basically try to see that UNICEF in that sense have figured certain issues with regard to in 2001 in 150 million children in that sense at the age of 5 in that sense are being malnutritious, and that of course, is one significant thing which has to be highlighted. Either it is a question of the sickness or faltering growth or the diminished learning ability. All these things in that sense are basically leading to the further issues like maternal age, literacy status and the work outside home, and that is going to be an important issue. So, how we have to deal with these aspects is going to be a critical question, and the most important thing in that sense is that we have to speak about certain issues which are related to the issue which are waterborne disease in that sense, either it is a question of diarrhea or intestinal parasites in that sense. All these things are because of the unsanitary environment which contribute towards the malnutrition, and that is where we have to see that it is not only India alone in that sense. I think we try to see that the major cities in the towns in Africa, Asia and Latin America, they try to be the sufferer in terms of these particular issues. And so, what is needed in that sense of course, is that we have to speak about certain issues in which we can speak about how the children in the primary school going are to be enrolled in the school, and we try to speak about the practices which have been to covered with regard to the wash in that sense has to be very specific. I think it is basically with regard to the school which is seen as an integral aspect of education. Then we try to see wash in terms of schools whereby the Ministry of Education has to take a lead and to set standards for adequate and inclusive access to safe and drinking water. And apart from that, we also try to speak about certain other issues with regard to the establishment of menstrual hygiene management mechanism, including the safe disposal of soiled napkins in the schools and education in the schools. And then we have to speak about increased convergence with the health with wash in that sense is going to be another important issue. And apart from that, I think we have certain other parameters which tries to speaks about that we have to have the question of hygiene kits in that sense. The practice of good hygiene in that sense ensures that all students, teachers and the staff members drink safe water, use clean toilets, and the practice basic hygiene is going to be the important parameter which we have to take into consideration. And definitely we have to establish the or monitor the wash in terms of the school access, in terms of its functionality, or in terms of improving the wash facilities in the school. That is going to be an important aspect. And then I think to raise the profile of the wins and mobilize the partners to create the new social movement, I think there the role of the so called civil societies and the NGOs and the mass media or the local government comes to the picture. So, we basically try to see that these aspects are to be seen in partnership, and then they can be seen as the carrier in terms of improving the conditionalities of the various aspects related to these issues. I think the community led variables which are to be seen in terms of community education and community hygiene are going to be an important aspect to reduce the risk of child's death under the 5 years of age. And the most important thing is that we have to speak about the different plans, especially I think when we try to speak about the National Rural Health Mission. In the second phase, we try to speak about the reproductive and the child health program, which has resulted into the increased access of institutional and community based maternal, neonatal and the child health services. So, that way I think it is a good sign. And then we try to speak about the polio cases in India, which has declined through time in that sense is going to be important. And then also we try to see that the various World Health Organizations in that sense, or the Rotary International and Center for Disease Controls, they are all working for eradicating or minimizing the issue of polio across the world in that sense. And we also try to see that the rate of early initiation of breastfeeding which has increased drastically from 25% in 2006 to 34%. It speaks about the supplementation of vitamin A, coverage of certain basic things in that sense, which are part and parcel of NRHM and ICDS programs in that sense in the rural India is going to be quite alarming in that sense. And I think we have to speak about the things in terms of the disadvantaged groups, in terms of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, which are basically working for putting the things differently. And I think the Millennium Development Goal is working for these important aspects. I think somewhere we try to see that we have certain concerns which are basically meant for enhancing certain issues I think we try to see that what is most significant is the issue which has been resulted through the continuous decline of the child sex ratio from 927 in 2001 to 914 in 2011. And this phenomenon of course is prevalent in 27 out of the 35 states, and we try to see that we have this Nandi Foundation which has released its data on Hangama, that is the Hunger and Malnutrition Survey report of 2011, which covers around 112 districts, and the choice which has been informed to the Child Development Index. And the report indicates that 20% of the reduction in the prevalence of child undernutrition with an average annual rate of reduction of 2.9% is going to be important. So, that way I think we try to see that there is a gradual decline, and then we have the ASER, that is the Annual Status of Educational Report 2011, which revealed that the students enrollment increased to 96.7% in the rural areas in 2011. So, that way we try to see that the attendance level showed a marginal decline from 73.4% in 2007 until date, and then we try to speak about how the things have drastically changed, especially when we try to speak about the school as partners in sanitation and hygiene. We try to speak about the EcoSan model which has been practiced in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, and we basically try to see that these aspects in that sense are trying to have the basic objective of the specific strategies with regard to the safe water and sanitation. It looks to the technology and its application, especially in the engendering programs, to understand the system and institutional mechanism for coordination among the various departments, to gain insights into the school and community linkage, to observe the Nalli Kali, that is the playing learning methodology in that sense as such, and to promote the swastha, that is the school water and sanitation towards health and hygiene. So, these are certain things in that sense which has to be taken into consideration. We try to speak about the cases with regard to West Bengal and Maharashtra also, but we try to see that how the different public partners in that sense in alignment with the world organizations are going to speak about these issues. The most important thing in that sense is the rural sanitary mart network, which is basically trying to see the supply chain and its outreach. We basically try to speak about the community mobilization, which is basically meant for motivational activities for the demand of the behavioral change in terms of communication, to understand the role of awards and incentives in achieving the clean village status, to understand the institutional program mechanism for improving the skills and capabilities in management and monitoring. And then I think we try to speak about the solid and the liquid waste management as important source, and that way we try to see that there are certain stronger issues in that sense which are there with regard to the village water and sanitation committee, which is related to the maintenance of certain important aspect of the decentralized management of drinking water supply. And for that I think we have the water safety plans concept in Madhya Pradesh in that sense, which is trying to focus upon the child focus model, which aims to provide the water safety on priority. In that sense, we have to speak about the issue of the water reuse technology for the hand washing and the toilet flushing. We have to familiarize the scientific basis for effective wise water management, and then we have to have the government of Madhya Pradesh future plans for the scaling up, to understand the approaches in line with the initiatives which have been taken place in the other states. And I think we try to see that the organization, that is the Center for Science and Environment Rain Center, which is trying to preserve and harvest the rainwater in Chennai. These are certain things in that sense which are being done at different levels, and the most important is that we have to speak about that how these programs in that sense are going to bring about certain issues of right of children to free and compulsory education, which has been enacted in 2010, and now we try to speak about how they are going to be seen as path breaking strategies. And then I think we can speak about the contribution which took place in certain pockets of West Bengal, which basically deals with how the community for development programs is in cooperation with the social policy planning, monitoring and evaluation, along with the different districts in that sense which is happening. And that way we try to see that there have been certain flagship social sector programs which has been devised by the government, state government in that sense, and there is this advocacy for changing the gears with regard to the strategic shift which is happening. And the most important thing in that sense of course is that we have to speak about certain issues where the intervention of the public private partnership is to be there. So, I think we try to see that we have certain issues which are related to the Union Ministry calling for the state ministerial sanitation conference to review the whole processes which has happened in that sense, the advocacy for the Millennium Development Goal which has to be achieved in the states of Odisha, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, and we have to address the issue of social exclusion in that sense, which is to be seen with regard to these states. And what is more important in that sense of course is the innovative solutions for water supply in the tribal areas, especially in UP and Gujarat, they are to be taken into consideration. And we also have the advocacy for the specific strategies for the excluded groups, either it is the question of state of Assam, Chhattisgarh, West Bengal, these things are going to be geared up in that sense. And we basically try to see that the hygiene practices has been seen as integrated in training of the frontline workers in the state of Assam, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, West Bengal, Gujarat and Jharkhand. And these are the good examples which are to be seen in terms of global hand washing dry, and then we try to see that there is a need for a certain amount of national communication strategy for sanitation, and which basically include promoting the convergence to integrate hygiene promotions in the training of the frontline health workers. And the most important aspect of course is that we have to speak about the fact that there are certain important issues which have to be taken into consideration. We have the issue of water, sanitation, hygiene and the midday meal which is going to be important. And the most important aspect of course is that we have to speak about certain issues which are going to be detrimental, especially when we try to speak about certain issues with regard to the implementation of certain toilet training methods among the children, that of course has certain bearings, especially when we try to speak about these issues. I think these practices have taken place since long, since 1980s, and then we try to speak about that the late toilet training practices in that sense are to be with regard to the parent oriented approach which has to be given importance in that sense. And then apart from that we try to speak about the slum sanitation programs in Mumbai which are also seen as one important marker. And I think that way if we try to see, we basically try to speak about that how we have the slum sanitation schemes in that sense in terms of the slum settlements which are basically trying to pursue for the issue of the public toilets. We have the World Bank slum sanitation programs in that sense, which are again meant for 60% of the slums in the Mumbai city, which has to be given the public latrines which has to be constructed. And we basically try to see that Maharashtra Housing and Area Development Authority and the Water Supply and the Sewerage Department is basically going to speak about these particular issue. And this approach in that sense has to be seen as something which is going to be integrated. So, the basic idea in that sense of course is that we have to speak about the integrated water supply and sewerage scheme which is going to be an important aspect of this program. But the most important thing which we have to see across is that we have to speak about the key NGOs in that sense which are basically trying to facilitate this pilot project. I think we have the concern for the Spark, the Sulabh International and Jan Seva. These are the three voluntary organizations which are basically working for, like Spark is working in the Mumbai city, it is having the credibility in terms of providing amenities to the urban poor, and implementation of this has to be seen in terms of the fact that it is a leading local NGO which is perhaps trying to provide certain basic amenities to the poor in terms of the sanitation blocks, in terms of toilets in that sense. And apart from that we try to see that certain other changes are there with regard to the scenario of sanitation in India. I think we have to have the long list in that sense, but the most important thing is that we have to see that how it is going to take into consideration the various weaker sections, especially the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, and how they are going to be benefited with the various schemes. but the most important thing in that sense of course is that we have to see that open defecation free villages in that sense is the basic motto which has to be taken into consideration. And the most important thing in that sense of course is that we have to speak about that how these activities in that sense are to be put into practices. I think the implementation of urban development and sanitation program on poor and marginalized is to be seen as the top priority, and the poverty of the people in that sense has to be addressed, especially the urban poverty removal strategies are to be seen on priority as one of the major agenda for bringing about the change. We have to speak about the attack on the space, and this has to be seen with regard to the urban shelters which has to be seen in terms of how the master plans in that sense has to be to take into cognizance these spaces in that sense. And we have to see that in the name of the human rights we have to see demolishing that is going to be real problems, and for that how the new technologies of transportation, construction, manufacturing and infrastructure is going to be important. And that way we try to see that it is the question of putting the people migrating to the urban areas has to be seen in terms of how we are going to speak about the rights of the weaker sections. And for that I think the Slum Clearance and Improvement Act which has been passed in 1956 has to be seen in terms of how we have to speak about the issue of their participation. I think the urban basic services and low cost sanitation program which has came long back in 1981 is basically meant for these particular issues, and then the improvement of 1990s in terms of urban basic services to the poor, all these things in that sense are taking into consideration. And then we have the Valmiki Ambedkar Awas Yojana in 2001. All these aspects in that sense are going to be an important marker with regard to the urban poor in that sense. As such, we have the Shahri Rozgar Yojana in 1997. All these things in that sense are trying to have the vertical C2 upgradation which is happening, and for that we have to see that how we have to speak about these issues. But the most important thing in that sense of course is that these aspects in that sense are to be seen as the new forms of model which has to be created. I think these sort of cases which we are trying to speak about are trying to speak about the concern for urban poor in terms of sanitation and also in terms of the safe drinking water. All these things in that sense are going to be important, but I think the coming slides in that sense are going to speak about the basic statistics in that sense which is involved. I think in the present government we have seen the drastic changes which are happening, and their concern is basically meant for bringing about certain changes in the lifestyle of the urban poor, and also it is meant for bringing about the changes in the lifestyle of the so called marginalized. So, I think we have to see that how our Honorable Prime Minister is going to bring about the new programs. I think his mission for Swachh Bharat in that sense are been projected through the various schemes, and with the advent of the government in that sense we try to see that wonderful initiatives have been there. The new collaborations with regard to the private partnership in that sense, PPP model in that sense has been generated, and the coming slides in the database in that sense is going to bring about certain changes which are going to be important. So, please try to see these slides. All these things are statistical based, and they are the flagship program of the present government of Modi's government in that sense, which is basically trying to speak about that how and the sort of where the interventions and the best practices have been taken into consideration across the state and in the various regions in that sense. These slides in that sense are indicative, self indicative. So, please try to see that and try to put things in a different way. So, that is all for this, and please try to observe these further slides in that sense, which are the secondary sources of data in that sense, that will help you in supplementing and understanding the effort of the present government to overcome the issue of sanitation and the best practices which are been there till date with regard to the issue of sanitation in India. Thank you.